The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers.
Hey everyone, Rachel Toback here, Chair of the Board for Women in Security and Privacy, also known as WISP, and I want to tell you about an opportunity to get involved in the community. On Friday, June 26th, the security community came together to lift and amplify the stories and work of Black security and privacy practitioners on Twitter and LinkedIn through the hashtag #ShareTheMicInCyber campaign, which was organized by Camille Stewart and Lauren Zabarick. In response to this campaign, we started raising funds for Najla, who was my partner in the campaign, also known as 4Psy_Q on Twitter, to sit for the PMP, OSCP, and CISSP. We ended up raising the $2,000 to cover Najla's expenses, and we're now moving on to cover as many training, certification, and learning or advancement expenses as possible, incurred by Black security and privacy practitioners in the Share the Mic and Cyber group. As of right now, on July 6th, we have $16,000 raised and about $26,000 in needs for the community. Please consider a donation or a corporate sponsorship to cover these expenses. You can head on over to tinyurl.com/sharewisp for our donation page, or you can go on our Twitter page @WISPorg so you can see the full donation link yourself. You're security-minded, probably want to see the full URL. I get it. Thanks so much for taking action, and I'll see you on the internet.
One of the things that I'm going to be speaking about at IWC, in addition to software bill of materials, is ways that you can shore up your security. And so when we talked about the Ripple 20 stuff, a lot of these companies, and I'm sure we're seeing a lot of this with the folks that don't have SBOMs either, they're not used to getting notified by their own, sellers or their own organizations that are actually buying their kit. In this case, we talked about Trek and the custom TCP stack. The JSOF folks had to actually reach out through a company that uses Trek's TCP stack. Does the SBOM allow for the granularity that would somebody know that it is Trek's software, and what kind of information do we have to share if, say, they are using Trek's TCP stack? Would it just say, we're using this version, or how granular do we want to get in that? And does that just really depend on the company that wants it or the company that's supplying it?
So the granularity is a key issue, because we want to talk about a couple things. First of all is, how much detail do you want about what I'm using for a given piece of software? And there's a trade-off. Right at the highest level, it's just I'm using, NPM. And then there's sort of the zoomed-in version, which is I'm using this function from this body of code. I think we've tried to choose the middle ground between there, which is give us the name of the software. The term we use is library, but there are a number of ways that we can be flexible depending on what the programming environment is. Essentially a way of uniquely identifying a piece of code. Now, uniquely identifying software is a known hard problem. Do you use com.sun.java or com.oracle.java? Right? It's the same thing, and you and I both know that we're talking about the same thing. But if we're trying to build an automated matching system, it gets tricky. That's one of the problems that we're actively trying to solve, and I'm happy to dive into more detail in the nitty-gritty on that front. But the broader landscape is to say, we want to use the term sufficiently uniquely identify, which means you need to know who the supplier is, what the component name is, and what version it is. So, and ideally a hash, so that you and I know that we're talking about the same version, and also you and I know that we're both talking about the same piece of software, so that I'm not talking about one that I downloaded from some random typo squatting website, so that we know there's some security. So once we have that level, the next question about granularity is how deep down the dependency graph do we want to go? I've talked to someone who says, I want to know what's in my embedded device all the way down to the sand and the silicon. That's, again, a lovely vision. We need overall a lot more transparency in the supply chain. But what we're trying to get is as deep as possible. We know that, but I'd much rather have some data than no data. And so this is where we start to get into how are we executing this at a commercial level. So some of this is going to be talked about through contracts. Some of it, for better or worse, is going to come out through regulation. But the good news is once we get to open source, as you work your way up the software supply chain, we think that it's going to be easier to do much of this in a more automated fashion, especially as more and more open source projects start to put their metadata in a way that is valuable. And in fact, one of the three standards I've talked about, SPDX, was developed by the Linux Foundation to help them better manage this upstream supply chain visibility for licenses. And because, right, you want to know if someone has included a random GPL license project in your Apache licensed project. You can still use that data for this SBOM information.
Okay. What other things in the SBOM be like? Point of contact for vulnerabilities? I mean, how is that something that could be added, or is it just up to the company to decide whether or not that's something they want to include?
It's a fun idea, especially about the point of contact. In fact, the first issue I tackled when I joined government 5.5 years ago was this question of how do we make a little progress on vulnerability disclosure. And it was the first time the government had brought together the security research community with the vendor community. That's a big, messy issue, and one of the things I'm trying to do is limit the number of moving pieces. And so we want to have supplier as the primary component, and the supplier not only tells you, where it comes from, but starts to give you the what do you do if there is a problem.
Okay.
And
Mr. Betcher, go ahead. Sorry, Alan.
I was just going to say the other vision of SBOM as we've developed it, because there are people who have a lot of interest in saying, well, once I have this data, I want more data. And so we have this notion of a minimum viable SBOM or a baseline SBOM that is just a dependency graph, and then we can annotate it or append it. One of the things that I'm, or even point to it so that there can be extra data that can follow it.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, I have a question for you, actually. So you're a filthy developer. You have a product that you create. Roughly, given the guidelines that we've been talking about here, what would it take to create and deploy an SBOM with LogMD? I mean, and I understand there's the initial investment, and then it would be potentially just incremental updates. But what kind of time are we talking about looking for somebody like with your software?
Well, it depends on how granular this goes. That was part of my next question, but Alan, you kind of answered it. Like how deep does the rabbit hole go? And once a customer gets a little bit, they want more, right? You give an inch, they want a mile. So I would think, I could get pretty quickly all the API calls that I make, all the, if I put in third-party software, list that. There's some proprietary stuff that I want to hold back, queries and such, into the operating system, but getting software like a dependency list, that wouldn't be too hard. It'd just take a few hours, to just kind of review the code and see what it's doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, so in my research, I actually found somebody who disagreed with Dr. Friedman, that you said PhD, so you're a doctor. My wife's going through her doctorate right now, so she's going to be Dr. Break to me pretty much whenever she gets hers. But so Rob Graham wrote for AT&T Cybersecurity. We have a link in the show notes. It talks about how software bill of materials is a misguided concept for DevSecOps. He's talking about 4 different levels for this SBOMs being licenses, modules, patch levels, backports. He said that SBOM would not have worked for a vulnerability like Heartbleed, and that it's unwieldy if you're having to give all of the libraries for, say, it's running a custom Linux or something, or if it uses zlib or PCRE, which is the Perl regex library or something like that. Zlib is used everywhere. It's got a ton of dependencies because you have to compile it thusly. PCRE is the same way, according to SBOM. And like we've talked earlier, granularity, it would be a nightmare to try to do. So is there a way to go, we use Linux and, with this kernel or whatever? I mean, how could you talk to some of the stuff that he brought up in his blog about that?
Sure. I love Rob. We'll always try to find some time to chat with him or drink when we're at conferences. Great conversation. I disagree with him on this, and frankly, so does a lot of the software industry. But he does capture a few key points, which is there are some very hard edge cases that SBOM doesn't solve. perhaps the biggest thing that he raises is this notion of backporting, right? Which is to say,
Right.
I'm using an outdated piece of software, and rather than bring everything up to date, which can be very time and labor intensive, I'm just going to go and change the 2 lines of code that are wonky or that have a security flaw. And what that basically means is you've forked that project, right? I'm no longer using OpenSSL 0.9. I'm now using Allan SSL. And that's no longer third-party code. That's now my code. And now I have to maintain that. And by the way, you as my customer should be pretty concerned about that, because if another vulnerability is found in what I forked it from, am I actually maintaining it? Well, that's important for you to know. So SBOM won't solve backporting, but I don't think too many people believe that that is currently the best practice for a secure development model, especially if you don't already have the internal ability to track all of your moving pieces. If you already have that internally, then you can already produce an SBOM. If you don't have it, then you're making your customers worse off. On the OpenSSL question in particular, Rob doesn't flag this in his blog, but I think it's a very useful example of one of the other concerns that we hear a lot, especially from folks who have a large customer base, which is not all vulnerabilities actually put people at risk. And this is something that a lot of security people have talked about. Right at first order, those of us on Blue Team, we focus on the CVEs, shut down the CVEs, but there are more and more people in the space that say, hey, listen, we're spending so much time doing this, we need to have some tools to prioritize. So let's use everyone's favorite example of Heartbleed, right? There are, depending on how you measure it, between 600 and 1,000 different function calls you can make in OpenSSL 0.9, which is vulnerable to Heartbleed. 2 of them called the code that led to allowing a third party to arbitrarily read from memory. And by the way, there was only implemented server side. Now, one, I get yelled at when I use this in a talk because people point out actually server side and client side are not nearly as simple as I think it is. But suppose you're only using OpenSSL for the PRNG, the pseudo-random number generator. And so you want a way to communicate downstream, hey, listen, I'll go from 0.9 to 1.0 eventually, but in the meantime, you're not affected. And one of the current things we're working on as a community, so if anyone has some fun ideas, please jump in, is a way of annotating this information downstream so that a supplier can say, this is not exploitable. And that has its own whole host of complications that we're trying to work through, in not least of which, if you're producing software where your general counsel let you say a simple declarative sentence about the security of your software, and if you're a customer, how much do you trust your supplier? So these are those are the non-technical things that we've got to work out, as well as finding a way to include this in an automation session, because no one in the security world wants more dashboards to light up with things that we now have to go buy another product just to turn off lights in our dashboards.
Right, right. So you were talking about disclosure, talking about all those vulnerabilities and how Heartbleed wouldn't actually be solved by SBOM, but I think it would. I think it would. Right there, allowing people to know, hey, what products that are still on my network use this version of OpenSSL would get us partway there. Would it solve it completely? No. But I think I loved your interview with Shlomi from JSOF, which is, hey, we don't even know what vendors to alert. Right. I actually told the story that he told on your podcast. I cite your podcast for this, where for those who haven't listened to them, you should definitely check it out. They had to use LinkedIn. They had to use OSINT to find out who are the developers that brag about using Trek and where did they work. Well, that means that maybe that vendor also used Trek. That's how little visibility we have today. And that's where we're trying to get with this idea of SBOM, is just knowing where this stuff is the first step.
The second step is, do I have to fix it? The third step is, how do I fix it? But the hard part today is, where is this stuff? And to me, that's it's crazy that in 2020, we don't know where the thing that we've just discovered is on our own networks, whether we're making software or whether we're just running large networks. It's crazy that we don't have that visibility.
I'm not surprised in the least. Asset management is something almost nobody can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So what we're talking about at the heart of the software bill of materials, at least in my opinion, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is all about information sharing. And it seems like that there are ways of doing that that would benefit more than just one company. So you got one company puts out an SBOM and they're using XYZ company. Well, XYZ company may be used by 15 other companies, as we've seen with the Trex software. They're used by God knows who else, and they had a split off subsidiary that's in Japan doing something with smart TVs and God knows what else. Would it not be better to have an organization like an ISAC or an information sharing organization that is keeping track of, I don't know, what vendors are being used by certain industry verticals? Like, in the healthcare organization, Medtronic is using blah, 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 or, and have some of these larger medical organizations or, IoT or SCADA folks get involved with them. I wouldn't say make it compulsory, because you can't force a company to do anything. But having some way of having an organization track that, or, there's got to be businesses out there that are thinking about this and using this as a business model. Hey, we're going to come in, we're going to help you track all of your third-party dependencies and your supply chain. I don't have an original thought in my head, so somebody's obviously thought of this before me, but it's about information sharing, right? So there should be ways for us to do that in an aggregate that would make it easier for everybody to benefit. Am I wrong in this thought?
Now, remember, I come from an encryption background. And so for us, trusted third party is a deus ex machina. We always view that as a sign of laziness. And really, you could just, sprinkle a little zero knowledge proof on that to make it, you're right that centralizing this would make it a little more efficient. The current path for sort of building this in a decentralized way means that we can go to a centralized way if we have to, if we can, but we don't want to rely on that. We don't want to rely on that for a couple of reasons. One, because again, as you said, there are different sectors that have been working on this. So for example, I can imagine in the automotive sector, we say, okay, our ISAC is going to handle this. Whereas, because there aren't as many players in that space. It's diverse, right, but especially with the OEMs and tier ones, it's not. Whereas in healthcare, it's different. In industrial control, you've got this challenge of in energy, you've got the vendors, you've got the customers or the asset owners, and then you've got the third-party integrators. And then you've got the whole competition challenge, right? Who trusts it? Do they get to charge for it? Is it a public good? Is it a private good? People have thrown around someone like Underwriters Lab or UL as be able to play a role in the IoT space, because there are already folks doing, and other testers, right? Not just this. So there are different models that we can use for centralization, but I don't want to build centralization into the core assumptions of, hey, what data should you share? And how do you collect it? Because again, that still gets to at the end of the day, what can the developer do to track things so that they know how to use it internally? And remember, right, as Brian pointed out, there's at the end of the day, this really should just be a couple of flags in your makefile. This should be something that your modern tools can track by itself. Ironically, this is one of those areas that bigger organizations have a harder time tracking. Right? The larger you are and the more legacy your build pipeline is, the harder this is. If you're small and lean, this should be a competitive advantage.
Okay. All right, cool.
What are you doing to get the word out to, let's say, I don't know, CTOs, right? That this is actually a thing that they can ask for?
It's coming on.
You mean
our show.
other than
That's what it
appearing
is.
on amazing podcasts?
Where do you find those?
No. So this is the this is a large part of what we're doing right now. So right now there's an entire working group in this process devoted to thinking about awareness and adoption, and we are in the next week or two going to be publishing, in addition to the technical white papers that we currently have, a 2-page document, and just here's a 2-pager that someone can look at, an FAQ. And we're also trying to reach out to particular sectors. There are some sectors that are actively involved, like the healthcare sector. We want to get more and more communities involved. And then finally, the last thing we're trying to do is drive this on the demand side of saying, hey, here are some tools that can automatically do this. Why don't you think about using them? They're commercial tools, they're open source tools. There's one security vendor that's in the static analysis and SCA space that I got some marketing emails saying you need to focus on SBOM, and that's sort of, it just makes me happy, right? Let's use some of the marketing hype that we're all kind of sick of in the security space, but actually use it to promote some things that are beneficial to the entire community. If you have other ideas on how we can get this out, please let us know, because this is something that affects all of us at least a little bit. But right at the moment, I'm the only person who's, this is my full-time job, as well, Jimmy, right? Right. This is just a small part of the ecosystem, but it's one that we think can fit in a lot of different places.
Nice. So that white paper that you're putting out, is that the feedback you got from the RFC that ended in July, or is that a different thing?
We've got a bunch of different things. So last November, we published 4 different white papers at NTIA.gov/SBOM. And by the way, if you don't think I'm very proud of having a URL that short for the federal government, I'm very proud of it. So first, you can think of that as tackling the first step, which is the what, the why, and the how. Sort of what is an SBOM? Here is the summary of a year-long discussion where we came up with a shared vision of this minimum viable SBOM. What are the different data fields? What is the basic operational model? So, for example, if you change your software, you produce a new bomb. Right? That's just how we conceive of this. So there's a shared vision. There's the why, which walks through the roles that I mentioned. People who make software, here's how SBOMs can help you. People who buy software, here's how SBOMs can help you. If you're operating software, here's how SBOMs can help you. So one thing that I love about the operational side is non-patching mitigations, right? So if you know that some software that's running your network is potentially vulnerable, you just know that there's a vulnerable component in it, but you don't have a patch yet. There's still things you can do. You can tune your IDS. You can talk to your threat intel people and say, hey, well, I'm not going to do anything now, but as soon as we see an active attack in the wild, let me know, and I've got a kill switch ready. You can segment your network. There are a lot of things that you can do without, even if there's no patch, or you're not certain whether or not you need to patch. So there's the what, there's the why, there's the how, which talks about these different data formats that I talked about. And then there's something that I'm really excited about, which is a proof of concept from the healthcare sector. Now, some of your listeners may know that the healthcare sector, not really the most mature of sectors when it comes to information security.
What?
I know, wait, you're shocked.
Blasphemous.
But this is something they care about. And they care about it for a couple reasons. One, because the folks that care about security and healthcare know how far behind. But 2, the regulator in the United States for medical devices, the FDA, has publicly signaled we're going to be requiring an SBOM as part of our pre-market certification. If you want to sell your product on the market, you're going to have to give the government an SBOM. The FDA, which is a regulator, right, they do have this power. They said, we're not going to tell you and this I think is very mature of them. This is I love it when government agencies are this forward thinking. They said, we're not going to tell you what that should be because we don't want to create a healthcare specific solution. So everyone go over to this multi-sector, multi-stakeholder process and work together. And that's been great because not only have the medical device manufacturers been participating, but some of the hospitals that actually have some decent security teams have been participating as well. So we've got some of the best hospitals in the United States: Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Cedars-Sinai, Hopkins, New York Presby. Right? These are, God forbid, you've got people in your life that are sick. These are where you want them to go. And what they did over the last year was do what I call the screw it, we'll do it live, where at that first meeting, we had folks like, Rob Graham show up and be very skeptic of, oh, no one needs an SBOM. And finally, some hospitals just got sick and said, no, we want this, we need this. We're going to partner with the medical device manufacturers and show that we can generate the data and use the data. And so over the course of 2019, they actually did this exercise where the medical device manufacturers generated SBOM data and the hospitals used it in their internal security processes for predefined use cases. So that was the good news where they were able to do it. The bad news, which we'll fully acknowledge, is that no one was able to do it in a completely automated fashion, in part because we were still working on the automation in parallel. So now, in 2020, they've been doing a second proof of concept exercise with an emphasis on automation and an emphasis on integrating this into the existing security tools, both on the development side and on the blue team side, on the use case side. They've been doing this in the middle of the world's worst public health crisis. One of my working group chairs of this effort is the CISO of New York Presbyterian, right? Talk about being on the front lines of COVID. He missed 2 meetings. That's how important this is to the healthcare sector today. And that's how seriously they're taking this. And I love that because it shows that people need this in industry and are willing to do the work to figure out how they can make it work. And so the next sector that says we want to try this is going to be able to benefit from all of those lessons. And the third sector and so on. So we're really not just saying, here's an idea. We are, to coin a phrase, talking about rough consensus and running code. We want to show that this works and this is helpful, and we are doing that.
Yep. Yeah. So in my research for this, I found what the FDA is calling the SBOM, which is the Cybersecurity Bill of Materials. And I went through and I read the draft documentation, and they said, in order to demonstrate reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness for software devices, documentation related to the requirements of the Quality System Regulation, QSR 21 CFR Part 820 is often a necessary part of the pre-market submission. So before they even get it to market, they have to have this. As part of the QSR design protocols, the manufacturer must establish and maintain procedures for validating the device's design, which shall include software validation and risk analysis where appropriate, 21 CFR 820.30G. So that's pretty cool that they're making that happen. And you told us before the show, apparently the FDA got wind of this and are now sending healthcare companies to you and the NTIA folks directly?
Yeah, so they've been participating, in fact, and the FDA officials have been watching what comes out of this and are turning around, and they're going to be building that into their guidance, and also, of course, working globally because it's not just an American problem, and so the FDA is working with their partners in other governments around the world to think about this. And so we're very excited and happy that the FDA is both really playing a leadership role and also amplifying this concept. And as goes the device side, because this again just talks about the device side, healthcare IT is a much bigger space, but we think that this is going to slowly expand into the broader space of healthcare IT, which is going to get us pretty far into general IT because they use a lot of general IT stuff.
What about the CDC?
I have not been working with the CDC personally. They've got their hands even more full today than but this is going to be something where, again, if you're in the medical space, I think you're going to be paying attention to this.
Yeah. There is a company that's out there trying to help medical device companies. I think they're not a sponsor or anything, but they call themselves MedCrypt, and they said it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year for a new medical device to get a 510K clearance from the FDA. I'm assuming the 510K clearance is like what you earn if you pass through and like are able to sell your device in the marketplace. I don't know.
This is going to be one of those areas where I've worked very close with the healthcare space, but I will not claim the particular expertise in the legal side of how to get my device on the market. But what I can say is this is an area where we've seen a lot of different smaller vendors come forward with expertise to help people secure medical devices, because Amanda was laughing that it's so far behind. And what's great is this is just going to be, it won't solve all the security issues for this, but it's such a natural part, and it's such an obvious starting point of, seems like a very old version of Windows to be plugging directly into the internet. Maybe you'd like to rethink it.
Yeah. So according to the website, I've got a link in the show notes. FDA clearance through the 510K process means agencies in agreement with the manufacturer of the medical device similar to a previously approved product. So, heart pacemaker version 2.0 is very much identical and functional to the old version. So that's that. So it may not even be that's a hardware thing anyway. But
yeah, I mean, I remember when they changed it so you didn't have to recertify through the FDA just for Windows updates.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, that's cool. So you mentioned there's other companies doing this. I tried to find, National Health Service over in the UK or India or Australia or whatever. I didn't have a good luck finding that. Is there similar initiatives going on in other countries? And are y'all coordinating? Because, eventually all the companies use the same software, hardware, et cetera. What does it look like in other countries? Do you have examples?
Again, I don't want to overstate the maturity of this idea. This is something that we think is right. It's going to be a phase shift where we're going to see it pretty soon everywhere. But it's hard to sort of point to success cases because it's hard to get the pieces working unless you get a bunch of kids jumping in the pool at the same time. But we've got a lot of we've talked to our government colleagues in the UK, in Germany, in Brussels, of course, with the EU. This is something that they've been thinking about, and even has some discussions about, how do they think about this in cloud context. And of course, got a lot of interest in Japan as well, including working with JP CERT. I'm going to be giving a talk with my counterpart from JP CERT later this fall at a virtual conference, and a bunch of Japanese companies are very interested in this as they sort of think through how do they make sure that they can maintain some leadership in software and security at the government level.
Okay. Very cool. Checking to see if we have anything left. I think we got most everything. How do we get our companies to implement these? That makes sense. I think the only big issue that we haven't been able to tackle with things like SBOM, and forgive me, please feel free to tell me if I'm wrong here. There's a lot of companies out there, especially with like SCADA equipment, where it's been running for 30 years. You can't bring up a spare nuclear reactor and test patches on your primary, that kind of thing. Or, worse, not only is, this component out of date patches wise, the company that created that no longer exists. So, that goes to something beyond SBOM, but I mean, would an SBOM be helpful for that organization? And how would an SBOM work for a company that maybe doesn't exist anymore? Or, you've got this list of things and it's like, well, that company went out of business 5 years ago, or it's been acquired 5 times since, this was written.
Well, so, at the basic level, this is exactly where we do need the SBOM, is to say, well, I can't rely on continued vendor support, so I need to at least know when I'm potentially at risk for not just the things that are affecting my product, but that could be part of an attacker's automated toolkit, right? And this is the danger sort of the risks in these underlying components. Is it's not just someone going after my product, it's they're going after something because they know how to attack it and exploit it. But you flagged an issue of legacy, which is one of these super hard problems across the entire security space. I think what gives SBOM a leg up in thinking about legacy as opposed to some of the other areas of security is we have an active market right now in source composition analysis tools. Companies that specialize at looking at your binary and trying to tell what are the underlying components that are in it. And there are even some folks that are beginning to specialize in the SCADA and energy sectors that you're talking about. So I was at an ICS conference in January, S4 down in Miami. Lovely conference. Dale Peterson's been a big leader in ICS security for a while. And we had a conversation. I gave a talk, but also at a panel with someone who made ICS software and Emerson, and a company that specialized in, that used it, Exxon. And talking about the challenges there, and they see it not just for a legacy issue, but also a responsibility issue. So if you tell me there's a flaw, well, does that change whose job it is to fix it? And that's also going to be something that we're going to have to work through as a community, is to sort of figure out, okay, you know, how do we, it's not just information, it's acting on the information, and customer support and all of these things that start to be real dollars and cents when you start talking about this. But final thing I'll say on the ICS space is the Edison Electric Institute, which thinks about power generation. They have issued some guidance on supply chain security, and they explicitly say, hey, we think everyone should ask for an SBOM. And what we're trying to do is create the tools so that when someone asks for an SBOM, you can supply it, and also you know as a customer how to ask for it properly and effectively. And so if I can just put in a quick plug, anyone who's interested in contributing, this really works because we have folks from across the security ecosystem chiming in and saying, you haven't thought about this one thing that I know about. And it will be, the outcome will be better, and you'll save everyone a lot of time and anguish if you chime in and say, hey, please consider my use case, please consider my sector.
Right on. So we've been talking about all this information sharing, and I just thought about something. So depending on the granularity of the SBOM, this could quickly become a document that, if found on a network, would give hackers really in-depth information about the computer systems on your network. Could that be a reason why a company would not want to get super granular with the vulnerability, or not vulnerabilities, but the knowledge or the information contained in? I understand that it's a security by obscurity thing. The hackers are going to find that eventually, but if you're going down to the library level and going, oh yeah, we're running FFmpeg 1.4 and it's like 3.5 now or something, or your OpenSSL is 098 like you said, and it's super vulnerable. Is that something that a company would want to classify as like business sensitive, or restrict release, or available only to the IT director, or only available to the security team or something? Would that be would an SBOM be a document that would be a restricted I would say KeyMat if it was in the military, but it'd be like a sensitive document that shouldn't be placed on a network?
Ultimately, so the cop-out answer is ultimately it's going to be up to every organization to figure that out. But I think you raise a point that we hear a lot, which is, are you helping the attacker by having this information out? And my general response is, it's 2020. We don't just talk about bad guys, we threat model, right? And let's do the simplest of threat models. We'll divide it into sophisticated adversaries and unsophisticated adversaries. So sophisticated adversary, they want to go after your system. This isn't hard, right? Anyone with a master's degree in computer science and software engineering can write a basic source composition analysis tool. It may not be perfect, right? But the tech to do this isn't that hard. And we all love the RE talks. And the first few steps, everyone feels like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. It's knowing what to do with a GDR output that's the hard part. So, right, your sophisticated adversary can find this stuff out without it being a much of an obstacle. And your unsophisticated adversary, your skiddies, they're not concerned about this because they're just spraying and praying. And this is where we have the asymmetry, which is the attacker doesn't care. They're just going to say, let's see what works. Whereas your defender doesn't have the roadmap. They don't know where the potential risks are. And so I don't see this as a roadmap to the attacker. I see this as a roadmap to the defender.
That's a good thought. Yeah, I appreciate that. That makes sense. I would still restrict its access, potentially not put it on a file system somewhere on a, where everybody and their brother can gain access to it, though. It would seem to me needing some kind of classification, for official, beyond for official use only kind of stuff. So, but no, I completely understand that makes sense. So, Ms. Berlin, Mr. Betcher, do you have anything else? I think we've hit pretty much everything.
All the other ones I had were answered.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, how about you?
No.
Cool. All right. Well, Dr. Friedman, you said you were going to be speaking somewhere in very soon. Is there tickets? Can we get that? Can we go watch you talk?
Gosh.
Or is it an industry insider thing?
Is
it a filthy industry insider thing?
I was going to say there are a number of different upcoming virtual conferences, but no one wants to watch yet another virtual video of people seeing it. But I can send you some links to see. I will be, for example, I think in October I'll be speaking at Linux Open Source Summit Europe, and a few other fun events coming up over the next few months.
Okay, very cool.
But more importantly, if anyone listening, like you, I just love that you said, hey, I'm giving a talk on IoT security. Let me talk about SBOM. If anyone is giving presentations, either public or private, and wants to know more, this is something that really should be part of every conversation about software assurance, about supply chain, about risk management. It's not going to solve everything, but it's definitely part of the nutritious breakfast.
Right. Well, I felt bad because I was like, well, I'm not the guy working on the SBOM stuff. You probably should have had him on the panel, not me. And, that's why I was reaching out, and I said, I told you in Twitter DM, I was like, in terms, for transparency's sake, I'm going to be on this panel. So, I just wanted to let you know, I will give you a call out, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that I was doing this because, I didn't want to be stealing anybody's thunder. And you were like, yeah, no, definitely do that. Talk about it. So I appreciate your alleviating my fear on that. So
this will only work if more people talk about it.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm by no means an expert, but I appreciate you.
There are very few experts in this, and more importantly, everyone is an expert in their own area, and SBOM touches each of it. Right? That's what I think I love about this topic is. It's not a single area won't drive this. It's at the intersection. That's why it's hard to produce. But right, this will work if everyone says, "Oh, I can do this. I want to be a champion in my own little corner," because I don't scale.
Right on. You mentioned volunteers. I know I saw on NTIA's website you've got folks like Josh Corman who started I Am Cavalry, which is the car security group. He's helping out with some of that. How does somebody get involved with this? They think, hey, I've got time. I want to help out and get this pushed out. How would they get involved?
Check out some of the documents on NTIA.gov/SBOM, and then from there, if you're interested, reach out, send me an email, reach out to me on Twitter, and we'll get you up to speed and find out where we can use you. There's going to be a place for everyone in this process. And like I said, this is something where it's kind of exciting to be at the forefront of an emerging security issue, and it's something that we think is going to need a little bit of on-the-ground hand-holding to fit into everyone's little niche. So this could be someone's opportunity to really be a leader. Cool.
And if people wanted to find you on Twitter, how would they do that?
At Allan Friedman, ALLAN FRIEDMAN. You can put the link in the show notes.
2 L's. Remember
Two
that,
L's.
2 L's.
Two
Not
L's and
one.
2 A's. Yes, 2 L's and 2 A's, which, by the way, is Welsh for the word exit. So if you ever go to Wales, there are big red signs pointing to the door with my name on it.
Right on. Okay. All right. So, yeah, thank you, Dr. Allan Friedman, for joining us. You can find him, online on Twitter, and he'll be speaking later on in October at, like you said, the Open Source Conference in Europe. Ms. Berlin, you're going to be doing some stuff very soon as well, yeah? Don't you have some work?
Oh,
Yes. You always do.
do I?
So that's the default answer.
Yeah, sure. And Brian Crow. What am I doing? I'm doing training through Wireless Hacking Fest and Hackfest CA. And I don't even know. I've lost track of all of everything. If it's not on my calendar for tomorrow, I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay. Well, that's cool. My internet's unstable, thankfully. Good. I've only got Comcast, which is freaking awesome. Okay. Well,
one of the biggest tech cities, on the planet.
It's third world country up here, apparently out in the burbs in Seattle. But so, Ms. Berlin, how would people find you if they wanted to talk about it? The tech and defense tabletops, mental health hackers, or just hang out and be awesome with you.
Yeah, and we're also hiring for Blumira. I wanted to put that out there.
Oh, please. What's the job?
It is a senior back-end engineer. So
back-end engineer? What is that, like sewers or something? What?
Yes, exactly.
Oh. Back-end development, must have OOP development and mostly Python, RESTful APIs, experience with Docker. Yep. Bonus points, must love DevOps, networking, and InfoSyster. Oh, well, there you go.
I know. Wait, that's not what it says.
That's what it says. It's what,
no,
pretty sure it says that.
No, there's no. I know it. I know it says no assholes allowed.
I don't see that part, but I'm sure you could always add it later. So how would people find you if they wanted to talk to you on Twitter?
At InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR, or at Hackers Health, or at Cyber Roleplay.
Cyber Roleplay. I keep forgetting that one. I keep thinking it has something to do with detect and defense.
We have InfoSec Roleplay and Cyber Roleplay.
Oh my, all the cybers. Very cool. Okay, Mr. Betcher, tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there with LogMD and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, we're working on some new features, obviously, and we'll be releasing a new version soon. Yeah, it's been sort of slow lately with all the staying at home stuff and all it's been crazy.
Okay.
It's a crazy time in the world, with all this virus stuff going around. So,
I hear you.
All the changes. I'm living in the past, man. Whenever somebody says face mask, I'm thinking, okay, 15-yard penalty. Wait.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
face mask.
But anyway, log-md.com. Just check it out. That's what I'm working on. And on Twitter at BetcherPwned. My last name, PWNED.
We need
Very
some
cool.
face masks.
You know what? Somebody asked me about the hoodies and stuff on our TPub store. Why don't we have black? And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Hackers like black or gray or whatever. So I'm going to have to get with you, Miss Berlin, and find out how to get those colors. Yeah, we could definitely do something with the logo. I'm sure they've got face masks on there now or something. Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the TPub store, if you want to go buy a T-shirt, I'm sure we can probably get whatever color you'd like eventually. You can go to tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast, all one word. We have a Slack, which is very awesome. We've got a lot of new people involved because of my local CSEC meetups. I've actually taken over both CSEC meetups here in the Seattle area and running monthly virtual conferences. well, not conferences, but virtual meetups with speakers. So, if you want to speak, as long as you can come on from 7 p.m. Pacific time to 10 p.m., we'd love to have you. So you don't even have to be in the Seattle area. I think we had web breacher, Micah Hoffman from, he lived on the East Coast, but he came and spoke about business OSINT. So if you're interested in doing that and you live in the Central Time Zone, come and hang out. Allan can even come and talk again if he'd like to. I wouldn't hate on that. We have about 20 to 30 people who show up every month. You can check us out on meetup.com. Just go to CSEC or CSEC East. You can find us. I run both of them now, so it's all good. We have Twitter. If you want to follow the BreakSec Twitter, or BreakSec, BRAKESEC, and you can follow me at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We're on Stitcher, TuneIn, Player FM. I've just added us to the Amazon and Audible podcast apps. There's pretty much nowhere you can't find us. Pandora, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, everywhere. So if you appreciate our patrons for their assistance every month in supporting the podcast, paying for domain registration, Libsyn, CDN, paying for the Zoom we use every month. And if you want to get involved with our community, you can, give us a little something in the tip jar there. The podcast will always be free, as we always say, but every little bit helps, and we appreciate the help that those folks give us. If you want to join our Slack, we have a book club. We just ended one, and we're actually going to start another book, which I believe is going to be on change management. Full disclosure, I'm going through the ProSci change management course on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday next week, with 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and they're talking about the ADKAR method. And I find it very interesting, and I suggested half jokingly that we should do that book because it's not a long one. And they said, yes, we'll go ahead and do that. So we're going to, learn about how to make the sausage in a company. For instance, if you're a not mature organization trying to, start up the change management process, this might be something that could be helpful for you. So join our Slack. We've got a SIM and logging group. So if you've got issues, configuring your favorite SIM, or you've got an MSSP that, doesn't know what they're doing, first reach out to Ms. Berlin if you don't like yours, or,
also reach out to me.
Yeah, you can do that too. But yeah, we got a lot going on over there. We have a social contract and we are moderated. So if you're worried about those kinds of things, we do require sign up. So you can send us a DM on Twitter to BreakSec, or you can email bds.podcast@gmail.com. I think that's it for the week. Ms. Berlin, Mr. Betcher, it's always a pleasure. And thank you again, Dr. Friedman, for coming on. And we'd love to have you come back on. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be able to send you a postmortem on how the panel went. I did put on one of my slides, if you only get one thing from my talk, this email address, and it has your email address at NTIA.gov. I was like, reach out to this person and, learn how to do this stuff. So that's, yeah. So I wanted to make sure you got your 10 seconds of fame there. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. It was a joy.
No problem. All right. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be kind to one another, please. Please, please, please. Take care of yourself. It's starting to get a little harder as the days get shorter, but, go out, take a walk, try to do some mindfulness exercises or yoga or something, whatever makes you feel good that isn't in front of the computer, if you can keep from it. Mental health is important. Take care of yourself, like I say, because it's only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.